Good morning, everyone. It's 7 a.m., November 14th, 2018, and we'll call this meeting of the Fergus Falls City Council Committee of the Whole to order. Roll call, please.
Effort.
Here.
Fish.
Here.
Rachel.
Here.
Hooper.
Here.
Thompson.
Here.
Armstrong.
Here.
Speedo.
Here.
Hicks.
Yep.
We have a quorum. First item of discussion this morning is the Hoot Lake EDA grant program, and I'll call on Ryan Miller to lead that discussion. Morning, Ryan.
Morning, Your Honor. Good morning, committee members. I didn't know I was going to be the first one, so I'll try to get through it quickly. And we have an update on our EDA grant studies, and then also there is some new information towards the end of the report that I'll have a request for a recommendation to the council to approve the final two studies of the grant report. Make sure this is on so I can switch slides. So just to start, I have a little bit of a background on why I'm here and what we've done. So this is all regarding the planned decommissioning of the Hoot Lake coal power plant over on the east side of town. So just a little bit of a history and background. So in 1914, Otter Power started operating the hydroelectric unit at Hoot Lake. Years later, in 1921 and 1922, two steam generating units were added. In 1959 and 1864, two coal-fired units were added at the site. And then much further in the future, just a few years ago, Otter Power announced that the coal generating portions of the Hoot Lake power plant site would be decommissioned in 2021 is the plan. A couple years after that, a local stakeholder group began meeting to discuss the upcoming closure and decommissioning of the Hoot Lake plant. The stakeholder group is made up of representatives from the city, the EIC, the county, Otter Power, and some other representatives such as West Central Initiative, and that group began discussing the needs and questions around the closure, and identified a federal EDA grant to apply for that could help fund some studies to identify questions and answers to the situation. So in 2016, the city applied for and received an EDA grant to fund some studies, two of which we've already gone over, two more I have a final report on this morning. So where we are now, 2018, the final study reports are being developed, or have been developed, the first two. And then, like I mentioned, in 2021, Otter Power plans to retire the Hoot Lake coal power plant. After 2021, we know a few things, and there's still some questions, but we know that the plan is for the hydroelectric unit to continue operations. It's part of the hydro relicensing process currently being undertaken by Otter Power. The power generation capacity that will no longer be occurring from the coal plant will be shifted to natural gas and wind generation, wind production operations in the Dakotas. And neither of these options were possible at the Hoot Lake site due to a lack of resources, such as a mainline natural gas line to convert that plant to natural gas. Through the process in our work with the working group and our studies, we've engaged with Otter Power in the discussion along the way. Otter Power has mentioned they'll work with employees at the site after it has decommissioned to work on continued employment opportunities. And after the closure, Otter Power will start working on the post-decommissioning plans. But for our grant work, for the EDA grant, we had 4 studies that resulted from the grant funds. The first 2 we've already gone over, so I'll have just a short review of those, and we'll hopefully focus more on the last 2. But we had the preliminary engineering report, followed by the Northeast River Reach Small Area Plan, And our final two were the economic impact analysis and the fiscal impact study. So just a review, we've already gone over these quite a bit, but the preliminary engineering report, it was developed by Bar Engineering, and a final draft was presented earlier this year and accepted. In the preliminary engineering report, there were recommendations to have some additional monitoring and planning in the future around some city infrastructure, including sanitary sewer crossings, bridge crossings, the water treatment plant intake, and water treatment plant backup power generation options. So just a few pictures of the infrastructure. The railroad one's not a city-owned, but they did recommend sharing this information with the railroad as well for their bridge crossing. More review, the Northeast River Reach Small Area Plan, developed by Bolton and Menck, and presented and accepted this past summer. The recommended actions out of that plan, there were some land use and development plan recommendations, parks, open space and trail plan recommendations, transportation plan recommendations, and public utilities plan recommendations. Those are all recommendations based off of the final land use plan that came out of the study that included the Hoot Lake plant site itself and the larger surrounding study area. So to the new items that we'll review, the final piece to the EDA grant work was to do some economic and financial studies incorporating all the work that had been done. The first report is the economic impact analysis, and this was a report developed by the University of Minnesota Extension through their Center for Community Vitality. They run fiscal impact models using an input-output modeling program called IMPLAN. They use inputs that this IMPLAN model has developed, a lot of data that they've put into this system, just some nationwide data that can be used for projects, and we also did add in some customized data to that baseline data that the IMPLAN system operates on. So we entered in as many known inputs as we could into that general IMPLAN software. And it puts out some results that include indirect and direct impacts to the local economy through jobs, local spending, and economic output. Like I mentioned, we tried to put in some customized inputs and data. We had Arto Power working with us on that process, and through that effort, this plan came up with some moderation efforts, which show hopefully some lesser impacts to the closure with work that can be done before the plant's closure. So the moderation efforts that we entered into this impact analysis, there was a large note that even though the Hoot Lake coal power plant will close, the headquarters for Arto Power will still remain in Fergus Falls, and that continues a large economic activity for the community, including a large percentage of economic spending related to all power production will continue through the headquarter operations here. A big exception that was noted in the study was coal purchasing, which will no longer occur because the coal power plant will cease operations, but coal purchasing is not done locally. We don't have any coal mines in Arto County. I mentioned earlier, Arto Power will propose working with all employees affected with the closure to remain employed with the company. So those two moderation efforts resulted in a better outlook in our economic impact analysis. The remaining input was all of kind of baseline average data that was taken into account by the IMPLAN software for the average coal-fired power plant. So some of the results then after all of the results of the impact analysis, the outputs, the estimated loss to the local economic output is 5.65 million. That's both direct and indirect losses. The estimated indirect job loss, and that's indirect, is 15 jobs. So through other business and industry that may see a loss of economic activity because of the closure, it's possible that there would be up to 15 jobs lost. Now, I noted that that's indirect. There are 32 employees currently employed at the Hoot Lake plant, so those would be direct jobs impacted, but as mentioned, there is the plan to ensure that those employees continue employment.
Hey, Ryan, question for you. So I see the 4.15 million. So where does the 5.6, I see it in the narrative, I don't see it in the chart. Where
There's a chart on the next slide, it might help explain that.
Oh, I see, indirect.
I'll go through these last 3 bullets, and then there's a slide with a chart kind of explaining all the numbers. So the estimated loss of labor income from those 15 jobs would be about $400,000 annually for lost labor income from indirect job losses. The largest indirect job loss impacts projected would be in the transportation and warehousing industry, primarily our railroad, the Ottertail Valley Railroad. Other industries impacted would be retail businesses, government services, health and social services. So here's a chart explaining, all the direct, indirect, induced impacts. So direct output losses at the power plant itself would be 4.15 million, indirect business-to-business losses 1 million, and induced consumer business losses would be 0.5 million, so for a total of 5.65 million. Was that better answer that question?
I see now. Sorry, I jumped ahead.
Not a problem.
Ryan, I have one question. Those jobs that the people are going to stay with Ottertail, are they thinking they're all going to be here in Fergus, or are they going to be throughout their system?
That's not known, but the hope from
Because that's an impact too. Even though they're still working for Ottertail, they may not be living in Fergus anymore.
True. There are also some employees that work there that don't live here currently, so it's kind of goes both ways, but the hope would be that the majority of them stay working for Ottertail Power and locally would be the best hope.
I think you're right, Jim.
Pardon?
I know some of them have moved to Wahpeton and down to the one on the South Dakota plant down there. So
Big Stone.
Yeah, Big Stone. So you're right. They're employed, but they're not necessarily employed.
But not it, yeah.
So you may see some still working for the company, but leaving, that's a possibility. So looking at the jobs a little closer, those 15 indirect jobs, here's where they may, and then these are just projections, so we don't know exactly what it might be, but as you can see, the transportation and warehouse sector is the largest possible indirect job loss industry. Retail, trade, government, health and social services, finance and insurance, and then administrative and waste services. So that's all I have on the economic impact analysis. There were a few questions. Were there any other questions on that before I moved on to the fiscal impact study?
Yeah, one more. Have we heard anything from the railroad? Are they going to continue to come to Fergus Falls, or will they? Well, I know they'll have to for the ethanol side, but other than that, will they be coming into Fergus?
Yeah, I think what you mentioned there is the big one. They have plans for expanded business opportunities elsewhere, such as the ethanol plant, and they have plenty of other opportunities to stay locally. There's no plans for them to be leaving as a result of this.
Well, the good thing is they won't be blocking the streets. They'll
Over
be
there
able
anyway.
to go through it any time rather than have a
Still
train.
will be with the corn trains going down the branch.
They have been in close communication since 2015 as well, and
Okay.
understanding these plans, and that's been what's driven some of the discussions on where is there additional opportunity for potentially rail-served customers, and there has been some progress in that.
Okay, good, thank you.
I think one other thing, it would be worth noting, not only does this have a fiscal impact on the city, but it also has a fiscal impact on the county and on the school system and HRA. You know, currently, you know, the county, you know, has a $270,000 of property tax that comes from Hoot Lake, and the school has about almost 200,000. And HRA is 10,000, and that too will get redistributed amongst the residents of Ottawa County and the city. So that it doesn't just affect Fergus Falls. Obviously, we're a big recipient of the loss, but it's also the county and the school system.
Any other questions on the economic analysis before we move on to the fiscal impact study? Okay, Ryan, go ahead.
Sure, so the fiscal impact study focused more on just the impacts to the city of Fergus Falls fiscally. We partnered with Springstead Incorporated. It's the city's municipal financial advisor. The fiscal impact study incorporates known tax data, like Member Hicks mentioned. We know there's a number of different tax impacts for the closure. We also incorporated elements of the partner studies, the previous studies that we just went through. Tried to input some of that data into the fiscal impact study. And so the results are a few different fiscal scenarios post-plant decommissioning. And we'll go through those in some more detail, but the first would be looking at just the pure lost property tax at the site with no future planning, just looking at the loss itself. Then it goes into some projections incorporating the land use study recommendations for the Main Street residential build-out, the Wright Lake residential build-out, the Fur Avenue multifamily projections, and the Fur Avenue commercial land use opportunities. It adds those in to see how it might mitigate the loss noted in the first bullet, the lost property taxes. So the first slide here is looking at just the tax loss impact. It's a model that kind of does a 5-year look at the step down of production and ultimately the ceasing of production in 2021. So there's the estimated market values for the site and how that calculates into the net tax capacity. It shows how the estimated market value will decrease through this 5-year step down, which results in a direct loss of net tax capacity. And on the bottom line there, you will see the cumulative reduction to city property taxes. So that's what we're looking at in this first chart, is what the total loss will be to the city's tax revenue from the site. And I circled the middle number, the $362,710. I know it's the biggest number there, and I didn't circle it to kind of make it more glaring, but I just wanted to reference that number later on in the report here. That $362,710 is kind of the final high-end loss, which would be noted in 2023 after the decommissioning. So with that, $362,710 loss annually in tax capacity, the study then kind of broke down what that might look like to local taxpayers who that loss could result with increased tax to the local taxpayers. So they broke it down into residential, commercial, industrial, and multifamily residential units, and what that impact could be annually for each of those market value levels for those three. So, for example, a $300,000 home could see a $100 annual tax increase to go towards that $362,000 loss. A $3 million valued business could see close to a $2,000 annual tax impact. And then a $3 million multi-family unit apartment could see a $1.299 million, or 1,299. That sounds a lot better. 1,000 increase. So that's kind of a, the worst case scenario. That's what could happen if there are no other increases, which we hope to see some other increases as growth occurs. So hopefully we don't get to that worst case scenario. So then we get into looking at projections for the growth opportunities that were noted in the land use study. So the full fiscal impact study breaks down each of the 4 land use opportunity areas in more detail. I've just included the combined chart here to show a total. So the top chart lists the 4 opportunity sites: the Main Street Residential, Wright Lake Residential, Fur Ave Multifamily, and Fur Ave Commercial. And it shows, well, actually, both charts are the same. It's just 14 years, so first 7 years on top, second 7 years on bottom. So it shows the potential to add tax capacity at each of those opportunity sites, as well as the total. And so you'll see if those growth opportunity areas do build out, you could see up to $358,298 in added tax capacity by 2030. So that comes just short of meeting that 362,000 loss that was noted in the first chart. But that would mean, the highest build out from each of those opportunity sites by 2030, it could come close to mitigating the loss. And then you can see each of the different years where we would be at, assuming the most build out possible up to those years in those opportunity sites. And one final note that was noted in the fiscal impact study is looking at the best case scenario for those opportunity sites would come at some cost for infrastructure. So though we could come close to mitigating the tax capacity gap, that would come at some possible costs if there's no developer buy-in or developer shared cost for the infrastructure. So for street, sanitary, sewer, water infrastructure, and storm sewer, the total initial investment could be just over 10 million, and then annual costs just short of $1,929,028. So there will be some costs to try to get to the development needed to start thinking about mitigating the loss of tax revenue.
Thank you, Ryan. What questions do members have on the fiscal impact study?
The next 5 years, you projected 358. Go back to that one more slide. There you go. In the last 10 years, have we gained that much in the city?
This is an aggressive.
I know, but I'm just saying this
build-out.
to kind of get us a happy medium between the two. I'd love to see that, of course, but in the last 10 years, I don't think we've grown that. We're going to take a huge loss without the power board. That's a real aggressive, that's a possibility, but it's not. That's the max.
That's 12 years out, the 358.
Yeah, this is
is
also
12
2030.
That's 12 years out.
No, the 358 is 2023, isn't it?
No, 2030. It's 2 rows.
Oh, I can't see. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not reading it right then.
So I'm sorry, they're 2 separate charts. The top chart is 2020 through 2026.
Oh, okay, I was going all the way down to the bottom. Okay, I understand. Sorry about that.
So it wouldn't be until 2030 that you could see.
But I think
Really
it's still
cool.
a fair question. I think the content of your question is fair. I look at it that, we'd have to invest $11 million to get a return of kind of $360,000 in 12 years. If we put 10.7 million into, the bank, could we get 3.8 $350,000 of interest that we could knock off. And I think as well, this is assuming that we have a willing seller, of some of the land, that, I think, Otter Tail has to be a willing seller to sort of sell the land to us, and I don't know whether they are at this point in time, but I think it's an aggressive timeline to get it done, and it's a lot of infrastructure to put out where we don't have infrastructure. And then maybe we should focus on building where we have infrastructure connection today.
That is a good point, just to go back to the land use, the small area plan. So like you mentioned, a lot of this is privately owned land, so this would be dependent on private landowner decisions in the future. These are just opportunities that were identified as possible opportunities but it would be private property owners' decisions to go forward with any redevelopment.
Ryan, that land that's there, does Otter Tail know if that's contaminated?
There are a few areas that have some coal ash cell storage areas that will likely need to be off limits for development for a while. That was taken into account in our land use planning model. So the seal ash landfill, if you can read that small print, kind of on the southern edge of the pink area, that it would be a sealed ash landfill.
Other than that, where the plant is at, it is okay, do they know?
That would, any findings would come from in future deconstruction or decommissioning.
They haven't done the borings then yet to see if it is, I take it.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, those ash cells, they're not contaminated, they're appropriate ash cells, like
Yep.
we would have at our landfill, so all MPCA appropriate and.
I understand that. I was just wondering about
Your Honor,
the
Councilman
plant
Bush,
area itself.
we're not familiar. We shouldn't represent that they haven't done that, but we're not sure if they have or not. So just to make that clear, we don't know.
You mentioned deconstruction. Do we know, do they have plans for the physical building at this point?
Not that we're aware of, no.
Okay.
Any other questions on the economic or the fiscal impact studies? If not, I would entertain a motion to move this to the council to accept the two studies.
Offer, Your Honor.
Thank you, Justin.
Second that, Your Honor.
Thank you, Tom. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion- Aye. One opposed. Five opposed. Thank you, Ryan. Next item on the agenda is the 2020 Complete Census Count Committee, and I'll call on Ryan Miller.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, committee members. All right, this one will be much quicker, but I'd like to discuss the 2020 census that's coming up. So earlier this year, staff was contacted by a partnership specialist from the Census Bureau who wanted to come to the city and talk to staff about what's called a complete count committee for the upcoming 2020 census. The complete count committee, you should have a handout in your packet that talks about the census and a little bit about the complete count committee. But the key points are that the census is an important event for not only the nation, but for small governments, local governments, for allocation of legislative representation and allocation of funding opportunities, federal funding opportunities. So it's important that we try to do our work locally here to get as many people in our city counted, get our population accurately shown for what we have here in our community. And so to do that, the Census Bureau is asking cities to commit to forming or sponsoring and forming a complete count committee whose job would be to develop some local specialized marketing plans to reach out to some of the harder to reach populations to make sure everybody knows that there's a census coming, prepare them for the forms and mailings and calls. Some of the harder to reach populations might be some of the larger multifamily residences, including apartments, senior housing, school dorms, those types of things. Just large multifamily units, some lower income rental units, those types of things. So the committee would be established to develop partnerships with some of our other organizations in the community to just kind of word of mouth, get the word out the best we can, cover as much of the community as we can with our umbrella marketing. So the Census Bureau has given kind of a template of how that committee might look. We'd like to start working on building a committee, but we wanted to request a resolution from the council first to sponsor that committee, and then we can work on identifying how that committee might be structured.
And there's a sample resolution in our packets that we would move on to council then. So entertain a motion to move that resolution to the council, and then we can take questions for Ryan as well.
Offer that resolution on behalf of name of city or county.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Scott. Discussion? Anyone have any questions for Ryan? Ryan, do you want to just outline the role that the city plays in conjunction with those other entities and what the federal government has, is the state and federal funds that come into a community to help make, so what role does the city play in that? Are we just a facilitator, or how does that work?
Well, the city plays a couple of roles in the census. They're currently working on addressing services. So GIS department is working on getting all the addresses up to date so that we're getting all the forms mailed to the correct locations. That's kind of the front end work. The back end work, beyond doing the best we can to promote the census, I don't know if there's any formal role we play beyond this.
This year, the state of Minnesota is especially interested because we are at risk of,
Sure.
highly at risk of losing a congressional seat. So there is a big push from the state demographer's office and others through the state of Minnesota to ensure that we work as best we can to make sure we are counting everybody only once.
Thank you, Tom.
Did you get an impression from the partnership specialist how widespread this effort is? I mean, are they visiting every community in the area and undertaking similar initiatives?
Yes, she was on a huge tour. That we met with us on a grand tour of the state.
Okay.
Going from community to community to promote this effort. So
Good.
we're not the only one. It's the census count issue is nationwide.
Yeah. Yeah, I think whatever we can do to help with an accurate count is definitely the best.
Any other questions or comments? Jim?
I would imagine if we're going to lose, it would be a representative we would lose, correct?
Yeah,
Yes, it would have to be represented. That would probably be an outstate person rather than a metro person. that would
After the
lose.
census, they'll redistrict. So there's,
Yeah, but they're not gonna lose it down in the cities, we're gonna lose it out here.
there's more population growth in the states,
So
but
we
they'll
really wanna
they'll
get the
realize
outstate count in to make it accurate, so we don't lose that representative.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign, the motion carries. Thank you,
One other
Ryan.
thing regarding that then is the composition of the committee. It's noted in a bunch of their material that there could be a elected official on the committee, so I don't know if you wanted to discuss having a representative either chair or participate on the committee from the council.
Sure, maybe that's something we could bring up when we have the resolution on Monday night. We could appoint someone from the council to be on that committee.
Right.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Item number 3 is a Bolton and Mink update on downtown Riverfront master plan. I'll call on Barry Glinky.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Just wanted to follow up with this group following our September 17th work session where we presented some of the initial findings from some of the information gathering that we had went through for the project here. So a couple of these slides you've seen in the past, just to kind of refresh everybody. I'm sure everybody's familiar with where we're at, what we're looking at. The 2 blocks just to the north of us here. Looking at different improvements in that area, Riverwalk, amphitheater, some type of market, maybe some parking lot improvements, regional trails, that kind of stuff is what we're looking at there. Update on where we're at as far as schedule goes. We're nearing the end here. We've got another project management team at the end of the month, so we're right in between the last 2 green boxes on there. We've got some agency coordination to do yet in regards to the river, some of those river improvements, and looking at that as far as the DNR and different folks like that. But we've accomplished all of our data gathering and input from the public, and you'll see here as I get in here what kind of results we've gotten from that to date. Some of the issues that were identified early on, prior, when we first kicked off here in August, these are some of the hot button topics that were further illuminated to us. Parking, accessibility to the trail during construction, anytime, or the improvements down there, just getting to them. Safety, visible, accessible marketplace, multi-seasonal use, since it's middle of November and winter's already here, try to extend the season a little bit. And then the future regional trails down there. Those were the main issues that were identified early on in the process. Those issues were predominantly identified through the public involvement process. We had some public hearings early on with those stakeholders, or not public hearings, public meetings with different groups. And then we also had an online survey that we did. If you recall, last time I was here, we were sitting at about 59 respondents. We've increased that several-fold to 500 respondents. So we've got some more data, a little bit more information on that. The senior center, with the help of Ryan here, took our survey and did a phone survey with that to all their members. And they had about 187 respondents through that process. So I think that group was captured, the opinions of that group was captured in the results. So that leaves us with about 310 or so online respondents through the whole 3-month process there. In addition, after last meeting, to try to rectify maybe some of those responses prior to our last open house on the 24th of October, myself and some Bolton and Mink staff walked the downtown, stopped into all the businesses, whoever was open and around between 10 and noon that day. Stopped in, talked to them about the project, invited them to the meetings, and got some input from them as well. So some of that reaction is in here as well. But so this is briefly some of the respondents and some of the data we gathered through it. Higher percentage, or a large percentage of the respondents have lived here for a while, more than 10 years. And they spend anywhere between 30 minutes and 2 hours downtown a day. So we'd like to extend that time period that they're downtown, provide them some more activities for that. Top reasons: shopping, special events, recreation, and other. That other category garnered a lot of variety of responses. The common thread was eating in restaurants. Once we sorted out business development and jobs and all that stuff, this is what they wanted to get downtown for. This changed a little bit. Early on, work was in the top, was 3rd ranked, so that's dropped off. So maybe we got beyond the people that just work downtown in our respondents, so they dropped off the top 4 list from early on. Method, 80% on this survey, people are driving downtown. So that was up from earlier, only about 50% earlier. So we've got probably more of the people that are driving to downtown. About 160 people in this survey said they would like to walk more, and an eighth said they'd like to bike more. That's about 65% or 65 people of that 500 wanna bike a little bit more, so kinda leads us to trail efforts a little bit. But almost half of them say they still wanna drive, so they wanna drive downtown and walk, so we gotta provide some spots for them to park. I'll back up, about a fourth of them said they wanna use different multimodal modes to transport, so driving downtown, parking, and then walking, or biking downtown and then walking, different modes there. My sticky paper here. Proposed elements you feel are most important. These were some of our respondents. You'll see the two in the middle, recreational trail and the riverfront balcony. Now the riverfront balcony includes that overlook predominantly on the west block along with the market space. That's all lumped together in that respondent. So you can see they carry the most votes, I guess you could say, through that process. Restrooms, there's a big other category, amphitheater and public art. Originally, when I talked last time, recreational, public art, and amphitheater were the top three. So things have adjusted a little bit, predominantly through the recreational trail, balcony, overlook, market area. Those voices were heard. Some of the other responses include focusing on the downtown, aesthetics, and business development and employment in downtown. That's where a lot of the other category came from as far as the respondents there. Biggest concern was cost, and that was in the original one as well. Parking was one of the other ones. You can see parking's down a little bit as far as percentage basis. Our little to no concern is up as far as percentage basis through those different stages of the results. Construction accessibility is there, and then others. Again, the other comments are based around they don't understand why, how is this going to get business, how is this going to get people to town, that kind of stuff. Need jobs versus this. That's where the other vote came in with the supplied comments beyond that. What's missing? Downtown was one of the other questions. More shopping, restaurants, businesses, family activities, water park splash pad, river recreation focus. Those were predominantly the same items as before, the youth and family gathering, the public gathering, shops, restaurants, art, history, and river recreation. So those kind of carried through as well too, but those were the high-ranking things. So using kind of those, we're hitting pretty much all of those with what we're looking at down there. So with that, this is kind of where we've kind of settled in, I guess, on the east block here. It's the block straight to the north here. You can see the amphitheater is the focal point there with the red roof on near the river walk down by the river, continuing on to the east. That'll be part of that regional trail effort. The red roof you see on the left there, that's a restroom facility. So we've got some public restrooms in there. We've also, due to the grade out there, we've opened that up. You see the little gravel patch behind there. That would access to kind of a half basement into that building for storage for amphitheater needs or anything like that. Lighting or speakers, sound systems, anything that Len might need to do some maintenance down there. And then the structure in between there with the blue, that's the water jet splash pad area and kind of a seating area with some shade structures there. So that's an area where some gathering can take place along with a little bit of recreation entertainment for the kids. That also serves for the bathrooms, maybe a place for them to go dry off or change clothes before they get wet and want to get in everybody's car. So that ties everything else together. We do got a couple things you can see extending over to the east there onto the courthouse property. We still have to work out some discussions with those folks. And we'll see how those progress as far as that goes. The West Block concept, we went through several iterations on this one as far as how much of that block would be covered in some type of market space, and we've kind of settled on this this approach here, this would, as a modeling exercise, this kind of handles where the farmer's market wants to be as far as size to handle their amount of vendors. And that is kind of where we use to scope where we want it to be. So this will handle what they are looking to do. They were out in numbers at the last public meeting in the end of October, after they shut down for the day, and we went over a lot of stuff with those folks for that. And we still leave the main corridor coming from the north to that river overlook. And then there's some common space. You can see the little stars there. Those are meant to be a table with chairs around for stopping up to the pizza place and grabbing a pizza to go and going down to the park. Or maybe there would be a delivery service down to the park at some time. One of the other major comments we heard early on was the parking down there. This was kind of the initial sketch we came up with as more of a corridor identified alleyway. You can see it by the buildings. Through several discussions with staff and the businesses down there, I was kind of discovered that this probably wasn't going to work real well as far as deliveries, a nice north-south pathway to walk. You can see with the vehicles aligned east-west. You park on the south, you got to meander through vehicles and snow piles and all that kind of stuff. So with that in mind, I'll back up before I go. So this layout here represented a loss of about 78 parking spots between the two parking lots. So we went back to the drawing board a little bit and laid it out more similar to how it is today, with on the on the western lot with the more vertical walkways north and south. This allows better access to the buildings as far as deliveries, pickups, all that kind of stuff. And it also allowed us for a 6, 8, 10-foot buffer off the buildings to the south for garbage container storage. That was one of a concern that was raised. We had originally talked about putting that on the other side of the alley, and then who uses that, how does it get there, and how does that work? So that kind of opens us up for some more space for that as well, rather than bringing that on the other side of the alley. But this results in an 83 stall net loss. So 6 more stalls than that. So with that, that's kind of where we're at. Our next step is a PMT meeting here at end of November with staff to kind of finalize where we're heading and where we're going. And then here in December, we'll formalize all this into a design development document for use as we go forward.
Thank you, Barry. One question I had, if as residents, if there are no businesses, maybe get a little deeper into this and see maybe more of a finalized or getting towards a final plan. If they still have questions or comments as they're looking at this, just particularly I'm thinking about the flow of the parking lots. I've heard a couple comments about that, just small things. What's the best way? Is it just through city staff, through you, or
Website? Well, we took down the survey. So we'll add to the website. We'll add maybe just a comment, a link to a comment,
of course you could also
email to generate.
Contact staff, we'll forward them
get through
accordingly
city
to it as
staff
well.
or use? Okay, thank you. Other comments, questions, Brent?
As far as the breakdown on the parking stalls that we lost, do we know how much are in the east and how much are in the west?
Yes.
I'm not even gonna try to read it.
It might be better on your slides. It's
Yes.
bigger.
It's on the bottom corner of the slide. On the east, on the
200 on the west, and I think it says 100 on the east.
I mean, how many are we actually losing?
No, existing, there's 200 existing on the west lot, and that, in concept 2, that would go down to 140.
Yep, so 60 on the west,
70,
And then east would go from 100 to 77.
23 on
23.
the east.
I was reading the top.
So it's 83 total, correct?
Yep.
It's like those numbers on the back of your cell
Comment?
I have a kind of a common question.
It's 23 on the east.
For this to be kind of obviously an economic driver, You know, have we given any thought to who's gonna manage all of this, you know, so it remains viable? And that's maybe more kind of a question for staff. You know, we're gonna make this investment, and then, you know, we need a plan more than hope. You know, hope isn't gonna get people to come downtown and use the amphitheater. You know, are we going to charge people for the use of the amphitheater? You know, I think before we go down this road and actually cement, we need a business plan of how we're gonna manage it as well, you know, and I think that's something that we need to be thinking about. You know, it's maybe a little bit out of your scope, but when we pass it over, you know, we've got this, however many $1 million investment, we need to manage it.
I know
We've had
staff
those
has
discussions.
begun those conversations. I'll call on Amy Baldwin.
Yeah, that has certainly been a discussion, even from the concept in the master plan itself, back in 2017, about how that would work and the importance of making sure the space was programmed and supported through promotion of it as an opportunity, and then the actual programming of the space and coordination of users and activities. The Public Arts Commission has expressed a desire to help with that thought and how that could be proposed, not that they would be the ones to do it, but that they would be willing to take on that charge in 2019 to think about that and to bring their expertise from the arts communities and programming expertise that a number of them bring, and they would be willing to do that. So they'll be before you next month talking about their kind of mission statement that they've been working on to help express who they are and what they hope that they can do in service to the city. So that would be a time to potentially advance that discussion if that's an avenue to go.
Thank you.
I'd like to see that before we, you know, rubber stamp kind of spending the money.
Yeah, we still have a final document before anything would be approved in December, correct? Is that right?
Yeah, that's
We
the
still have to
plan.
initiate the project. This is the design.
Final design.
Got it. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a Kennedy Secondary School Area Transportation Study, and I'll call on our city engineer, Brian Uvarro. Good morning, Brian.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Your Honor, and members of the council. In consideration of time, I'll try to go through these next two items. Pursuant to the Kennedy School Traffic Transportation Study recommendations and recent discussions between the city council and the school board, Moore Engineering has prepared a professional service agreement to review preliminary design of the Randolph Avenue and Freiburg intersection. In general, Moore Engineering services will consist of a few stakeholder meetings, additional traffic analysis, i.e. future traffic projections, and more importantly, preliminary geometric design configurations with the cost estimates. As you want to note from the last meeting and presentation from Moore Engineering and Stonebrook Engineering, that sometimes, you know, these need to be done just to make sure with future projections of the Kennedy School and everything, that sometimes a mini roundabout or enhanced to full design is something to consider and perhaps the most viable option. So I have included Moore Engineering's statement of qualifications. Additionally, Tyson Hychek from Moore Engineering is here to answer any additional questions. But in consideration of recent meeting developments with the school board, recommendation either to accept or reject Moore Engineering's professional services proposal for the Freiburg Avenue intersection improvement in the amount of $29,900. And item number 2, if accepted, I'm requesting initiate public improvement 5324, the Freiburg Avenue intersection improvement project. This cost here is eligible and could be funded out of the city's municipal state aid street construction fund. So at this time, I'm requesting action on their proposal.
Thank you, Brian. Are there questions from the council? Anthony?
I think as the school, for me personally, as the school is unwilling partner in this, I don't know why we would spend another $30,000 on it until we see them coming to the table, you know, to help with the project. I mean, we can spend the money, but you know, I think we have enough projects going that spending a lot of money on this. You know, when they clearly sit here and say we're not going to spend any of our money, when the initial discussion was it would be a 50-50 project, I'm not willing to support it at this time.
And I just want to note, Your Honor, if I may, From this study, the impetus of the actual intersection study was more driven, the impetus was to the morning and peak hour vehicular movements generated from the school. Obviously, safety is the most concerned in everything, but in regards to this intersection, that was the noted, because we looked at all-way stop control, intersection warrants analysis that are totally driven by vehicular movements and everything. So just wanted to add that note.
Thank you.
Other comments? Brian, Guy, help me out here. Because I know we had these discussions, as Anthony mentioned, with the school. I don't ever remember hearing a number, but maybe there was a 50-50 match. But does the school generally participate in road construction programs?
Yeah, it's a joint cooperation and everything. If the need is established and everything, yes, it's not too uncommon.
Okay. Thank you.
What did he, I got a question.
Yeah, Darren.
Didn't they talk a little bit about what they did for some of these, they did some minor changes that helped some things? Can you kind of go over?
Yeah, quick recap on that study that was done. It was identified in the deliverable as far as a tiered being lowest cost, more easier to implement type of measures. And that was some of the measures that were already implemented that I believe Mr. Ness was responding to, that was a noticeable improvement. This roundabout, and there was a few tiered other items as we move up the hierarchy for improvements, and like a roundabout such as this was a long-term implementation of a plan, hence more costly too as well. So obviously, for what they have noticed and everything, there has been some improvements thus far with what they've already implemented in the city.
Thank you, Brian. So I guess it's up to the committee. Do we want to move this to the council for discussion? Do we want to let it die in committee? What are the wishes of the council? The committee, I'm sorry.
All right, I don't give the school another chance.
I think just table it.
I guess I don't hear
I guess I'm not willing to spend the money if they're not going to participate.
all right, I don't hear a motion to bring this to the council, so I guess that's where we're at. Thank you, Brian. Item number 6, I'm sorry.
5.
Item number 5 is a 5-year CIP and street improvement plan. Again, Brian Navarro.
Yes, thank you. SRF and staff have continued, and we're finalizing the city's street improvement plan. Nearing the completion of this, major component of using this project is the implementation of the city's ICON pavement management system. Throughout this process, and known to myself, it became very evident that this program's database consisted of a lot of erroneous street segment attributes that have now been reconciled. I just want to note this erroneous data enabled the program to run at certain capabilities, but when we get into these scenario generations and everything, it became very problematic. But as known, this was unknown for the extent by SRF, and they've incurred additional expenses beyond their initial proposal. So they've sent it a contract amendment not to exceed $8,000 to help cover some of these costs. I believe it's recommend that this is approved and everything. The data, for instance, this ICON database system, for example, consists of over 1,200 street segments. Not only attributes such as length, width, vehicle ADTs and everything. So there's a lot of data that had to be gone through and reconciled. We worked with them and GIS, Mark Jorgensen, and we made a lot of progress on it. Unfortunately, it did incur some costs. So at this time, I'm requesting accept SRS professional services proposal amendment in the amount of $8,000. This cost is eligible and proposed to be funded through our MSA maintenance fund accounts allocations.
I will offer that.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Scott. Any further questions or discussions? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Final item on the agenda is the 2019 utility rates, and I'll call on Finance Director Bill Sonman.
Well, good morning, and this item is just going to be for your information because this is included within the budget presentation as well. Now, I know we're at 8 o'clock and you have 52 slides in front of you. So, are you excited? I'll try and be brief. But this is important information, so I do want you to be informed on this as we come up to the budget presentation, because we introduced this back in September, and then wanted to give you more information today so that you can act on it and feel comfortable with where we're going in December. That's the first meeting in December, on December 3rd. This will be incorporated into that.
Bill, let me add real quickly before we start too. Some of the things he's going to talk about in his presentation will be helpful for our discussion following this meeting. And so maybe since you have so many slides, if you could highlight some of those big things while you go through it, that'd be helpful.
Sounds good. Yeah, so we talk about a lot of projects at the city. There are a lot of projects involved in our utility funds as well. It's our infrastructure. It's, you know, your water, sewer, stormwater, and then our refuse-related services as well. So this is just a slide of our enterprise funds, what we're talking about today, the various services. So I'm going to hit right off the bat of what we're looking at. So for an average utility bill of 6,000 gallons usage for a residential customer, looking at going up $6.14 or 6.22%. So that is, you know, that's a significant increase. A change from what I presented in the budget is the water rate increase going up higher. Looking at water, a 10% increase in that. We did that a few years ago, a couple years in a row. Did a couple 5s after that and a 3%, going back to a 10. We have some significant project estimates that just came in the last couple of weeks that I've incorporated into this. So sewer, looking at a 3% in that. We haven't done that for a little while. Stormwater, moving up 50 cents to the flat rate. Garbage, 3.5% we're looking at on the service. Looking at a 16% for the disposal rate. I'll get into that a little bit more. And then the waste management tax follows those refuse items. Tree management and recycling staying unchanged. So the last time we changed rates, you can see in 2017, refuse back in 2016, and then the demolition fees we did increase just this past July. So we did not do any other increases in the 2018 year. Where do we fall in comparison to other cities? We're right about in the middle. So if you look at an average bill for a Fergus Falls resident, it's $70.72. This study is prepared by AE2S Engineering, and they do it from surrounding states. And here we have where we fall in Minnesota cities on average. So refuse collection. Effective now January 1st of 19, the cost for disposing of our garbage is going up 19.75%. So, you know, that's 20% increase for us to get rid of our garbage. Our businesses, we go around, we collect all the garbage, we bring it to Otter Tail County, dispose of it with them. They send us a bill for disposing of that because then they handle that, bringing it over to the Perham facility. Sometimes if it's bypassed, it goes out to Gwinner, North Dakota. So we implemented single sort recycling back in October 1st of 17. We did reduce the waste going into that waste stream by 456 tons, which did save us $41,000. But even considering that, with the increases we're looking at in costs are still going up. So I'm recommending a 3.5% increase in the residential commercial fee, and then 16%. So not the whole 19.75, but something a little bit less in the disposal. And then, of course, all our projections show inflationary increases in our expense side of the equation. These are the same rates that I presented to you at the beginning of September within the budget presentation. Yep.
I'm sorry, that $41,000 that we saved, what time frame was that over?
Thank you. This was in that first year of operation, so from October 1st of 17, then through the end of October of 18.
Okay.
So we're looking at the first full year of single sort recycling.
Okay, thank you.
Bill, on the county, do you know what the justification is for the county going up so much?
Yes, I talked with county people on that, and they need to be funding their depreciation of their perm facility where they handle all this waste, I guess they have not been fully building in their depreciation into the rates. Now, me as a finance director, I fully support doing that. We do that on all these enterprise funds. We have all our depreciation so that we have money there to make those major capital repairs. So I understand they need to do the same thing on the perm facility. When things break, you got to be able to have the money to fix it. So that's their justification on why. We'll see a couple increases coming the following years, not this large, of course. They're doing a big catch up here, which we've seen, a couple years back too, was a large increase. But I forget if it's like a 4 and a 3 coming maybe in the next couple years.
Right.
So this is just a bar chart showing of our disposal of our refuse in tons. And you can see that decrease from 17 to 18 for those 12 months ended October 31st, so that we're showing once we got into that single sort, what does it look like after the first year. The recycling program. So we implemented that in October 17. We purchased 95-gallon single-sort containers through a grant from Otter Tail County. We only had to contribute $28,000 of matching funds from the refuse fund to purchase those containers. We did see some increased costs in our recycling because we needed to get that side load truck. So our equipment costs went up. But our personnel costs went down because, of course, there's less people. Now we're running an automated truck. They're both built in there and reflected. Recycling tons did increase 540 tons, or 45% increase in the recycling. So we did see a win there on recycling. Again, it left that other waste stream, went into those recycle bins instead. So.
Bill, can I just ask a quick question? I know originally when that program rolled out, it was mainly to residents, and we didn't roll it out to the businesses. Is it out fully to all businesses now?
It's not fully implemented with all the businesses, but I'd say we're maybe 50–55% there.
Okay, thank you.
Just a question, what kind of a trend are we seeing? Are we seeing increasing usage of the recycling?
Actually, it's pretty disappointing. There's only a 30% participation rate with the city residents.
Wow.
So we've got some education, some promotion to do.
Okay.
So I will say on a blanket statement on that, in my projections, looking at the disposal cost of garbage, I did build in inflation factors. Typically, I build in at least a 4%. I took a little aggressive approach, backed that down to 2%, thinking we're going to take an aggressive approach to promote recycling to continue to get more of the waste into the recycling stream, more participation. So I hope we are able to do that so that my projections of saying our costs are only going to go up 2% in the refuse disposal, because we'll try to funnel more of that to the recycling side.
So
to go with.
To follow up on that real quick, so is it safe to send the message to the residents that the more we recycle, the more we're going to save?
Correct.
So if we want to prevent rate increases, recycle more?
Recycle the more, exactly. That's a good message to push.
Yeah.
So just going back, on that last slide, on this side you said there's 540 tons,
Yep.
or 45% increase, but on the previous slide we said there was 456 tons was removed from the waste stream.
Right, they don't agree.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you exactly why, but we see it, in the ballparks, we see it going down and one up in the other. Yeah, I don't have an answer why they're not exactly the same in tonnages, but.
Surprising on account.
But good catch. So that's the 540. Now, we used to receive some recycling proceeds from Otter Tail County, but as part of rolling this out, they had to discontinue that. That was part of the agreement of going into that, because they have had so much increased cost in managing single-sort recycling that they no longer pay us for our recyclables. So we actually saw a decrease in revenue there. All that being said, looking at no changes to the recycling rate. So this is the same fees, keeping them the same. And there's our recycling tonnages over the years, just showing that 2018, again, for the 12 months ended October 31st, going up those 540 tons.
Can you verify or somebody that the 25% that's wet waste, basically, in that garbage, that our figure, Len maybe could speak to it or whatever, is that I've heard that's about what it is. 25% of our garbage waste is wet waste, or a lot of wet food, and
Yeah, I guess I don't know that percentage for sure, but that could be. To implement another program just to pick that up, yeah, that would definitely be another increased cost too.
yeah, I mean, but I was just thinking that's not the only option that we have, you know, with the wet waste. We pick a lot up from restaurants and different places, hospitals, et cetera. And I just suggest that you look at that 25% figure, because I think there's a chance for either adjustment of rates as to who's contributing that, or possible ways of disposing of it. There are programs that they mix that with other organic material, and then they turn it into soil, because it's mostly food waste, and institutional food waste.
So that's certainly something to think about, because we pay by the ton when we dispose, so. So the recycling, the tree management, as you know, we're purchasing a tree waste burner. You just approved that at the last meeting. I think that is going to be a great thing for the city, decrease some of our costs there, be out at the landfill. So we're not looking at changing the tree waste fee. We'll now be handling that tree waste and getting it in there, so we'll have some changing of cost, but overall we should bring our costs down. And then that ash will be mixed with the compost, so not looking at changing the tree waste fee. Demolition debris. We did increase that rate for the demo project to $24 from $16, so we did a significant increase there in July 1st of 18. We have had a project overrun of $150,000 on that landfill project. I'm looking at recovering that over the remaining life of our active permit, is what I built into this. We did issue bonds for that project of $1,195,000. So I'm thinking we should go up $1 in that fee as I look at our projections, go from 24 to 25 starting in 19, to help make up for that additional cost of that project. That's demo. This just shows our refuse fund operations. I'll go through these kind of quickly. You have them before you. You can take them with you. But you can see where we've been. 2017, I'll just point out that net change in position looks a little out of place at 389. We had a transfer in from our old burner fund. The remaining funds there came in here. So that's kind of an anomaly, something one time. But 18, looking there, operating income 221,932. Change in that position, about a decrease of 35,000. If we do nothing with our rates, but of course we always see increases in our cost side, this is what would happen. And you see the operating income trending down, change in that position trending down. If we have increasing costs and we don't do anything with our revenue side, that's what we would project. Shows cash balance. We have two cash balances I look at in this refuse fund. The gray line, that's a little more flat, that is for closure and post-closure, it's called. We need to have money there to close the cells that are currently open before we open a new one. And then we need the money there in 67 years from now when we close that landfill for the final time. And then we have to take care of it for 30 years after that. That's all in our regulations of how we need to build our funding. So I'm maintaining a cash balance for that. It's a savings account for those items. You see that tip down in 23 because that's when we would close this cell we're currently in. So we use some of that cash. After this, it would start going back up a little bit again. The blue line, if we don't do any increases like we saw those incomes trending down, you'd be spending your cash balances and that would go down. Capital improvements for this fund, we're looking out to 2023 for opening a new cell, closing the current one. So you'd have $275,000 to build a new one, $200,000 to close the previous one. That's, we need to plan ahead for those, have that money available. Okay, if we build in these increases that I have told you about, and then also do, I think, like 3% increases each year to keep up with our inflationary costs, you can see we try to maintain our operating income and our change in that position. And then we show our cash balance so that we build it up so we have the money to build that new cell, and both those lines tip down in 23 because again we're using some of that cash in 23. Okay, moving to the sewer fund operations. We kind of jump around a little bit. In 2016, another anomaly there. You see that large change in that position? That was when we put water and sewer lines, you'll see the same thing in the water fund, around the RTC. So we have new water infrastructure. It was funded through a grant. So it shows as a contributed capital, it's called in this fund. But this is our current operations. Same scenario, if we project out, if we do nothing with rates, but we have increasing costs, you'll see that start to trend down. Same scenario with cash, of course, if you're not increasing your revenue, but if you're increasing your expenses, cash would tend to trend down. Sewer fund does have one of our higher cash balances for the funds. We have fully depreciated that plant in 2017. We've covered our depreciation like we mentioned earlier, which is a good thing to do. Recommend we always continue to do that. Capital improvements for the sewer fund. You can see the various years. Out here, this is at the plant as well as out in the collection system. I'm breezing through these pretty quick, but you have a question?
Just as far as the future sewer fund outlook, you know, we've done a wonderful job, I think, of going after the pavement conditions all over the city. But there's often been questions about, do we have an actual study that goes back and shows us the age of our sewer system and the type of material that is in the sewer and water all underneath the street. So there's another layer that sits there we don't look at, but that doesn't mean it isn't a huge part of an iceberg that we need to, and I just wondered if, when there is some money there, is there a way to go after and map that so that in the future decisions of councils, they can make a decision based on what's really there rather than what we, kind of know is there, right?
I see Brian nodding with me in agreement. I know our engineering department does do a lot of that. Lincoln Avenue is a good example where they're going to line those now next spring, I think it's right. We already got the bids on that. Bids came in great. He made me very happy on that. But going to line those in anticipation of getting that pavement, because of course, you're right, you've got to do what's underneath before you put new pavement down.
And that's just a recommendation from the Minnesota League of Cities that we
Right.
truly know that, and I was just wondering if our engineer might tell us, just comment on that in terms of future council's ability to make decisions, you know, based on that.
Could be a little long-winded. I'd be more than happy at our next session here, we can talk about that more, or if not, if you.
I think it's a good, whenever you feel, I just think it's a good thing to have for future members to make decisions on, just like our road thing.
One side note, I know we do televise our sewer lines as well, so we actually have a camera that can look in there in their condition, right?
Peg
So-
access?
I didn't hear you.
Peg access, right?
It's pay-per-view.
Yeah.
No, but televising it is one that does tell us what strategy is the best if we're gonna do trenchless technology or complete rehabilitation or anything, because not every candidate is likely. But there is assessment numbers you can actually assess if you want to get a composite citywide, just similar to.
Yeah, and the point was simply the Minnesota League said that if you do this planning, a lot of your sewer breaks, et cetera, water breaks occur at the bad times of year, and the costs then of repair are double or triple what they would be if there was a program where we made sure that at every street repair, whatever, we were truly updating all of our other infrastructure.
Yeah,
I agree. The money associated with that is, and that's what I mentioned, there's always a certain level of risk assessment. Not only are we doing asset management, but then also a certain level of risk assessment. Obviously, you want to get the most life out of your utility. You know, it could be 10, could be 15. But yes, if we had a policy just to go in and reconstruct, considerable amount of money. But something, you know, very noted point, yes.
But I just think the numbers, the millions in there, you know, in the sewer fund that we have can be somewhat of a false hope figure if you look at the long term. Just like our roads, until we did that, we didn't realize we were losing more than we could catch up. Even at this 20% gain, we're not going to catch up the way we need to.
and it doesn't take long to burn through $500,000 on a sewer project, so.
I think it's where Councilmember Speedle's coming from is that we moved to a predictive maintenance and non-destructive testing program versus kind of even a preventative maintenance, and maybe that's something that ultimately, I'd be more than happy to sit with Brian and talk about, predictive maintenance is kind of doing what you're saying. It's like looking, because some assets, are critical and you need to replace. Some assets will last longer. You can build 2 vehicles, exactly on the same day at the same time. You can drive them exactly the same. One will break down and one will not break down at different times. And so you don't replace assets that don't need replacing. You'll let them live for 15, 20 years, whatever they'll do. But you'll find that a brand new bearing you can put in can break tomorrow. So you do, and I think it's a complex program. And as Brian said, you actually have to spend some money up front to understand what you actually have. And then you've got to put the money into monitoring it going forward. And that's a cost initial, but long term it pays for itself.
Sounds good. Okay, so that's our sewer capital improvements. Looking at a 3% increase to those rates, these are the flat and then the flow at the bottom for residential. And then this is the chart for the flat and the flow for commercial. So if we do those 3% and then have those also 3% annually projecting out to maintain those income levels and those the net position of that fund, we do see a dip down in cash balance because of those spend down on some of those capital projects. After 23, we'd start this ticking back up again. So the long-term horizon, you're going to bring cash down sometime, but then you work on building it back up. So you have some of those waves. So don't be alarmed at seeing that come down some. I do project it going back up after 23. Where do we fall with sewer rates compared to other Minnesota cities here? You can see we're, a little below the half mark there. So again, from that study. Stormwater operations, bounce around a little bit. Here, 2017, that change in that position, a decrease of 73, a little more transfers to the capital project fund for stormwater projects that we did in 2017. I'm estimating that out for 18 as well. If, again, same scenario, if we don't do any increases, have increasing costs, you see that trend downward a bit. And then the cash balance would trend down as well, just like the others. Here's stormwater improvements. And we have all the detail behind these, and we continue, we'll be kicking off the capital improvement plan again now in 2019, and we'll refresh all these numbers. So looking at stormwater operations with increases, that 50 cents like we talk, I just try to do those steady, nothing too wild, just going up 50 cents. Here, I'm showing to maintain that. We still see a little bit down in that cash balance like we did in the sewer fund. After 2023, I'd see this going up a little bit again. Here's that showing that change of that 50 cents in commercial, and commercial per acre would follow. And then stormwater, we're a little bit higher towards our comparative cities in Minnesota. But I would tend to speculate that if cities aren't paying for it through a stormwater utility fund here, you're paying probably through your general fund for that. Street sweeping is a prime example. We charge half of our street sweeping to stormwater because that's directly related to stormwater management. Other cities may do that purely out of general fund.
Bill, our stormwater fund, we didn't start that till just a few years ago, right?
In the mid-90s.
Yeah.
It's already, so it's been 20 years.
I've been around a long time, so.
That was just a few years ago, Jim, you're right.
But compared to the water and sewer funds, it is just a few years ago. Water and sewer, we go way back on those, so. But it is our newer one, but wow, it is
one
already.
of our newer ones. We didn't do it before that time.
Right.
Maybe these other places did that, so their rates aren't as high because they've been doing it more years.
Right. So.
When I was a boy.
So our last fund, we're going to make it here, water fund operations. We have been increasing rates in this fund over the last few years. Here's a slide of the operations. Again, 2017, contributed capital is in there for those lines up at the Regional Treatment Center. Same scenario here. If you do nothing with rates, costs go up, performance goes down. Cash would really plummet in the water fund because we don't have that high of a cash balance compared to like the sewer fund. So if you did nothing with rates, we would actually go negative by 2023 with what we're looking at. So capital improvements, this is where we have some new information. We're going to continue to look at these estimates, but, and I'll have pictures of each one here for you, so we'll just walk through that. But some significant improvements in our water storage side of the plan. So one is a reservoir. We have a reservoir from 1914 that is looking like it needs to be taken out of service. So we'll look at that in the near future here.
Just a few years ago.
New construction would be, current estimate at $1.6 million.
Your Honor, does Councilmember Fish remember building this?
It was just a couple of years ago. So,
No, I don't.
so when we talk about projects, we have some big water projects potentially on the horizon. We're going to look at these estimates. We're going to look, do we need to rebuild this reservoir, or will it look something different? Your finance director doesn't know those answers, but I have the estimates and I put them in here. So 1.6 for that, and this needs to come out of service. We do know that. We have reservoir number 2 that needs repair and reconditioning, probably within the next 4 years at about $500,000. So we'd probably do this first and then decommission the other one. So you have the other one operating while we recondition this one. The water tower up on Cleveland needs to be repainted and reconditioning. Now this is repainting outside and inside, I believe. I believe you have to build an entire structure around it. That's why it's so expensive. We were not, over the years, we haven't planned on this much for repainting a water tower. So it's a significant increase. So $759, looking at the next 2 to 3 years. And then the other water tower within 3 to 5 years. Again, repair and reconditioning for $1.2 million. So I had to pick my jaw up a little bit. These are big numbers. But we have to take care of our water system. It is important, and these are big projects. So water recommendations, I recommend 10% increase like we did a few years ago here. And then 5, for 2 years actually, looking at 2020 as well, and then 5% after that. So significant increases in our water fund. Water rates are comprised of flat and flow charges, and I recommend changing them both like we were looking at on sewer. So here's our current tier structure for the flow usage. Going up 10%, and then I rounded them as well so that we came out with round numbers. And then here's the flat rate chart for that as well, going up the 10%. And then we look at, doing that to try to maintain now operating income and change in that position. This is large operating income and sizable change in net position growth, but it's because we have an older water plant and older water system that were built at lower cost. It is fully depreciated, the plant and whatnot, but we need to get that cash in to support this. I don't want to be bonding for painting a water tower. That's maintenance. We should be funding that from maintenance funds from this. The cash balance would still tip down here, 2023 down to 1.4. A little uncomfortable even at that level. So we look at this every year, but it kind of reinforces in my gut that I'm feeling right about doing the 10%, that we should do that. Now, after 2023, it is showing increasing there too. Just don't know how comfortable I am bottoming out there. We'll think more about that. Where do we fall in our water rates? This is a good chart because this shows cities that do lime softening. City of Fergus Falls softens the water, so the residents don't have to have a water softener in the house. It's good on the fixtures, as you well know. So compared to other cities that lime soften, look at how low we are compared to there. So that kind of reinforces we're not out of the ballpark of what we're talking about with bringing rates up and then bringing them up next year and the year after. If you look with Minnesota cities across the state, this chart shows cities that don't soften their water as well as the ones that soften. So it is both. That's why we compare a little differently. And then here's that example utility bill that we started with, coming to the end, just summarizing that for you again. And then last slide, the schedule. We came to you kind of introducing this. Of course, now I've sprung a little higher water rate increase on you today. So we're here today. Coming back to you on December 3rd with the budget is when I would foresee liking to do approval on this with the budget process. And then we'd implement all the rates except sewer in January. So the bills that went out at the end of January, sewer rates we change in April because we set those once a year. Makes most sense to do it with that. That's the presentation. Again, no, I'm not looking for your recommendation today because you just got this on your desk as well, but something for you to chew on as we get to that budget presentation.
Go ahead, Rod.
Just the sewer pipe that's across the river, I brought it up in the report earlier that we did on the northeast, we just heard about the northeast quarter. And they said in the report that you needed to monitor that because it was built on the condition of having a warm river.
Yep.
And so, first question I had is, will you plan to build in the replacement or removal of that in the future planning for your budgets? And if not, how will you account for that if there is a major accident with ice taking out that sewer pipe in the budgeting process?
So twofold, I don't believe that's currently in the capital plan, is that right?
No, I don't
think
believe
so. So I don't think it's currently in there, the replacement of it. Certainly, any issues with it would have to come out of that fund. I mean, it is a sewer pipe, we'd have to deal with that if there was something wrong with it. Even contending with the ice on it, if there was ice buildup, we would charge that to that fund as well as far as maintenance or the monitoring of it. Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions of Bill? Thank you, Bill.
Okay.
And with that, we will adjourn to the canvassing of the 2018 general election results. Do we want to take just a minute before we do that?
Can we do this one and then take a
Then
break?
take a break. Sure, that sounds good. I know I wanted to talk to one person in the audience, that's all. So, anyway, go ahead, Lynn, I'll call Lynn Olson.
Okay, this is just a procedural thing that we need to do after every election, that we need to do to canvass. The top winners of the vote getters are listed on the, you should have a copy of this, was in your packet. So the first ward council member, Krista Hagberg, second ward council member, Scott Bonney, third ward council member, Justin Arneson, fourth ward council member, Carolyn Gustafson. So we'll need a resolution to approve that. But just want to make a couple of notes if I could. Have to thank, we had 102 election judges that worked for the city last week, and just thank them for the fantastic job they did. And thank you to the 4 polling places that we use in the community. We will be changing some of those due to some space constrictions or having a beautiful new library that we get to use. But thank you to polling places. Some of the notes, we had 4,523 votes cast. So 75.5% voter turnout, which is the highest midterm we've had since I've been here. A lot of that was absentee, 1355, so we have to thank our absentee ballot board for all the work that they did as well. A great, successful election.
Lynn?
Thank you, Lynn, as well.
On the sheet, Your Honor. On the sheet, I think there were 2 precinct 1s and Ward 4 listed. It was just a typo, I think.
Okay, we can certainly fix that.
But I think you might want to change that.
I can certainly do that. Yeah, I see what it is.
And with that, any other questions of Lynn? And thank you, Lynn, to you and your staff for again, what a wonderful job that was done. And I would entertain a resolution to accept these results.
I'll offer that, Your Honor.
Second.
Scott? I'm sorry, Tom? Scott? Thank you. Roll call, please.
Abbott?
Yes.
Fish?
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Rupert?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
Arneson?
Yes.
Speedo?
Yo.
Hicks?
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Thank you. We'll be adjourned for just a minute while we